Yeah, g'day YouTubers. Tinker O'Toole again with another video. In today's session, we're going to talk about a flat grind using the side of the grinding wheel and using the radius of the wheel, because you get two completely different grinds, and it also affects the side plate angle and the top plate cutting angle. If you use the radius of the wheel, which is the most common type of method, you can get a different side plate angle and a different top plate cutting angle. It also depends whether you use a little bit of tilt. Now on full chisel you can have both, and we can give good examples of that. We'll just put a picture up of the first example, and the first example is what we refer to as grinding on the side of the wheel. So this is a hexa profile where we use the side of the wheel that comes right from the working corner down the side plate a fair bit. So you can clearly see where the grinding wheel intersects at the hexa, then veers off at 120 degrees, then goes level again on the bottom of the tooth. So that's what we refer to as grinding flat on the side of the wheel. When you grind on the side of the wheel, your side plate and top plate cutting angle won't change. It'll be the same. However, when you grind on the radius of a wheel, it will be different. So we'll just put up another picture. This picture shows the radius of the wheel, and the radius of the wheel is almost at the tip of the tooth. Not quite, but almost. So it depends on how you dress the wheel and how deep you come into the tooth as to whether you'll have a radius grind or a partial. You could have 90% radius grind and 10% on the side, or a flat grind. Now what I'm seeing on a lot of the new chains coming out, and we'll go from the least aggressive to the most aggressive, but nonetheless, Stihl's RS is quite an aggressive chain. So I'll put a slide up of that, and you'll clearly see that it's got that little working point there. So the side of the wheel just dresses the top plate angle there. There is a little bit of a difference. There's a little bit of tilt built into this. So the side plate could be 60 degrees, and the top plate cutting angle, which is the further aside, that's right on the inside of the tooth, that could be around 55 degrees. So that's that one there. The second one is Husqvarna's C85 X-Cut, where it's got a 40-degree angle coming down on the side plate. Yeah, quite aggressive. So in that situation where you've got that long flat, your side plate and your top plate cutting angle won't be too far apart. They'll be fairly even because of the angle that comes down. The best example of the side plate and the top plate cutting angle being exactly the same is Stihl's hexa. And we just put a slide up of that, and you can clearly see the picture of the hexa, that side plate comes down, the grinding wheel on the side, or a file comes right down on that side plate about 2/3 down. So if we measure the side plate, the top plate cutting angle is going to be exactly the same. Okay, so when we dress our grinding wheel, we normally have a card, a template like this, and we generally have a U shape like that. So that's what our grinding wheel looks like on the side, a half a circle. If you use a half a circle, you'll generally find out that the radius will come in like this. So most of the time you'll have a bit of a radius here, and if the side of the wheel and the radius intersect right at the top, you'll have a little bit of a flat section right at the top there. But however, if you tilt your angle from 50 to 60 degrees, you might find out that your side plate doesn't vary much because you're pivoting on the radius. If you pivot on the radius, you won't have much difference whatsoever. And this is very interesting because, you know, a lot of times I say, oh, look, a 50-degree angle is more aggressive. Okay, if you really want to get that more aggressive angle, the best thing to do is that if this is a half a circle radius, that's a half a circle, and that's a quarter circle. So if you dress your wheel with a slight radius like that, when the grinding wheel comes into the tooth, you'll definitely be touching the side of the actual top plate cutting angle, and you'll have a flat section on it. And that flat section will be the same on the side plate to the top plate cutting angle on the other side. So which is better? Well, from what I'm seeing Stihl's Hexa C85X cut that certainly has that flat section on the top plate. So just to illustrate that for those people I may be confusing with top plate cutting angle, when we look at the cutter, we'll see if we can zoom in and get a better picture of that. When we zoom in here, this is the top plate cutting angle, this beveled angle that comes off the top plate, which is angled approximately 30 degrees in most cases. So this beveled angle on here, this is a side plate over here, and this is a top plate cutting angle over this side. If you tilt your file down 10 degrees, you can end up with a large variation from this side to that side, right? And I can put a slide up that really illustrates that. We've got 3 slides. Now, the first slide will show a variation of 20 degrees, right, from the side plate to the top plate cutting angle, which is a huge amount. And you can get that using 10 degrees downward tilt and playing around with the grinder. The second slide will show 25 degrees difference between the side plate and the top plate cutting angle. That's a huge amount. Does it cut any better? Now, mind you, these photos that I've been showing are pretty old photos, but that's what they used to do back in the day. 25 degrees difference, that's a huge amount. 60 degrees on one side and 85 degrees on the other. That is a maximum amount, 85 degree side plate. So with today's modern full chisel chains like the Stihl Hexa, you don't end up with a different side plate to a different top plate cutting angle. It is uniform from one side to the other side, and it cuts better than standard full chisel. So there's no reason why you can't profile your grinding wheel to look like this. So this is the side where the grinding wheel will come down into the tooth like that, right? So that's your Hexa profile. Side of the wheel coming down here, coming down there, the 3 sides. That's what it will look like. Exactly like that. So using the side of the wheel is quite common in modern full chisel chains that are regarded as the most aggressive that are out there, apart from square ground, which is the king. So I hope that explains the difference between something that's being ground on the side of the wheel and something that's being ground on the radius. So here's another thing. I can set this at 50 degrees, which is more aggressive than 60 degrees. Then I can measure the side plate when this is set at 50 degrees and get 60 degrees on this gauge here, right? So we can put this on top of the chain and get a 60 degree side plate, even though we've dressed this at 50 degrees. Why is that? Because we've got a dressed wheel, it's got a radius, and the radius changes angles around the wheel. So it may be coming in at 50 degrees, but it depends when we check with our gauge, because when I tilt this, you can see it's a pivot point and nothing much happens. The radius doesn't change when I tilt it because it's a half a circle, which is exactly the same as a file. When we put a file in a tooth, and it's in like that, we're using only about a third of the file from the top to the bottom, because you're supposed to hold a file about 20 to 25% above the top of the tooth. So holding the file at different levels will give you a slightly different side plate angle. So the radius or the arc of the radius, depending on where you hold that in the tooth, can give you a slight different side plate angle. Generally worldwide, it's accepted that between 55 and 60 degrees is the optimal angle for great cutting efficiency. And if you look at Still's Hexa, it says that it's got a side plate angle of 60 degrees, right? So like most full chisels, you're wasting your time putting this on 50 degrees if you're going to get a side plate angle of 60. And if you put it on 60 degrees, you'll most likely definitely get a side plate angle of 60. So it can vary a little bit depending on the radius grind or whether you're grinding on the side of the wheel. Anyway, I hope that information helps. It's just telling you the difference between a radius grind and a grind on the side of the wheel, how it can affect the top plate cutting angle and the side plate angles, but we generally aim between 55 and 60 degrees for a side plate and a few degrees difference on between them. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.